Hello everyone, how's it going? Life's been pretty monotonous actually, which is amazing because I love following a routine that works. It keeps me focused. So anyway, welcome to Read a Day Club. This is Amreen, and today I'm going to be talking about Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I'm going to let that plane pass if you can hear it. Anyway, so so Aisha has also read and reviewed this book, just saying, and I have also read Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground and The Double. And one last thing, yes, after I ramble about this book, I'm also going to talk about my next 3 reads in case you'd like to know. Okay, so now let's talk about this big red book, the big red Raskolnikov, the protagonist, the murderer. Now, if you quickly want to know what the book is about, a troubled young man commits the perfect crime, the murder of a vile pawnbroker no one will miss. Raskolnikov is desperate for money but convinces himself that his motive for the killing is to benefit mankind. So begins one of the greatest novels ever written, so true. A journey into the criminal mind, a police thriller, and a philosophical meditation on morality and redemption. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Many things actually. Let me start with Raskolnikov. Now, this is a young man living in destitution who, because he thinks he's extraordinary, so that sort of gives him the authority to murder this nasty, mean old woman for her wealth. After the murder, realizes that he's not so superior after all. Raskolnikov believes that the superior or extraordinary man is allowed and even celebrated to step over, meaning shed blood and abandon morality with complete conscience, if that means benefiting mankind in some way. And he actually refers to this, and I clearly remember this. He refers to this as the destruction of the present in the name of the better. Okay, so but then Raskolnikov fails to step over, meaning he fails to he fails to be this extraordinary or superior man. He says that the old woman was merely a sickness because she was just a vile pawnbroker who didn't really care about Raskolnikov's misery and his destitution. So he says that by killing her, he didn't actually kill her, rather it was a principle that he killed. But it's only after the murder, after the crime, that he realizes that he killed himself too. Obviously his spiritual and moral self, just warped himself right there and then forever. Now, in this context, Dostoevsky also mentions that everything we are and everything we do largely depends on the environment and the circumstances one lives in. And while reading, you're so rationally coaxed into believing that the environment is everything and man nothing. Now, this actually reminds me of something that I read yesterday. Right now, I'm reading this book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul by Carl Jung. So yesterday, I was reading this chapter called Analytical Psychology. So in that, he mentions that the psyche does not exist in the psyche does not exist in its own right. It is nothing in itself but a mere expression of the physical world, of the things happening outside of you, things that have material form. So, it just reminded me of Dostoevsky saying that the environment is everything, and a lot of what we are and a lot of what we do depends on that. So anyway, Raskolnikov fails to step over because of his psyche, because he physically and mentally cannot stand what he's done. I mean, he decides to murder this old woman for her wealth, but then right after the murder doesn't even flee the house with that much money. And that is what this novel is all about. It is a psychological thriller, always battling between good versus evil. Now, I'm not saying that the whole structure of the book is wholly concerned with morality, but yeah, that is a very important element here, and you see that in the rest of the characters as well. For example, Raskolnikov's sister, who is she's his complete opposite. She's compassionate, she's innocent, she's selfless, and I mean, she agrees to marry this very narcissistic man just to provide for Raskolnikov. And later she even refuses to shoot another man when she has the chance, when he threatens to harm her. So that's how Dostoevsky has played out the whole good versus evil theme as black and white images between brother and sister. And most of such antagonistic characters in the book symbolize the voice of reason, even though they are as equally hopeless and miserable and needy as Raskolnikov. And each one of them, they all have their own authentic voice. You're constantly moving forward along with Raskolnikov and his interaction with his very loyal friend. I believe his name is Dmitri, yes, then with his mother, his sister, with the woman he eventually falls in love with the man who knows what he's done, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of similarities between this book and I remember when I was reading The Double, I hope that whoever has read Dostoevsky's works will agree with me. Like, in his books, the protagonist is always suffocating with anxiety, ambushed by his own conscience in a heavy, hopeless solitude, just lying in anticipation of his complete, inevitable ruin. And Raskolnikov is like that after the transgression. His conscience just doesn't let him rest. Fear and loathing become they become his whole fabric of existence. It was not to help my mother that I killed. Nonsense. I did not kill so that, having obtained means and power, I could become a benefactor of mankind. Nonsense. I simply killed for myself alone, and whether I would later become anyone's benefactor or would spend my life like a spider, catching everyone in my web and sucking the life sap out of everyone, should at that moment have made no difference to me. And it was not money above all that I wanted when I killed. Not money so much as something else. I know all this now. Understand me, perhaps. Continuing on that same path, I would never again repeat the murder. There was something else I wanted to know. Something else was nudging my arm. I wanted to find out then, and find out quickly, whether I was a louse, like all the rest, or a man. Would I be able to step over or not? Would I dare to reach down and take or not? Am I a trembling creature, or do I have the right? So, what does all this mean, this killing, redemption and repentance bit? I think Dostoevsky was trying to get to the core of the psychological nature of human suffering and reasoning, as a matter of fact. Through Raskolnikov, he sort of shines the spotlight on the importance or the lack of it of someone else's life, someone who's not your own. Because it's obvious that Raskolnikov doesn't kill for money or out of anger or resentment. He kills to prove a point to himself. The point being that he's above, the whole jurisdiction of law, justice, shame, repentance, morality and stuff like that, that he can actually take a worthless person's life and be okay with it. As for the possibility of redemption, you don't see that until the end of the book, and I believe that bursts through love. Yes, Raskolnikov falls in love with this most unfortunate woman called Sonia, and redemption also bursts through his belief in God. Okay, so now I'll be reading an excerpt. Now you should know that Raskolnikov's primary antagonist in the movie is the officer in charge of the case. I think his name is Petrovich, if I'm not wrong, right? So now he's having a conversation with Raskolnikov. He says, "Do you know how I regard you? I regard you as one of those men who could have their guts cut out and would stand and look at his torturers with a smile, provided he's found faith or God. Well, go and find it and you will live. First of all, you've needed a change of air for a long time, and suffering is also a good thing after all. Suffer then. I know belief doesn't come easily, but don't be too clever about it. Just give yourself directly to life without reasoning. Don't worry, it will carry you straight to shore and set you on your feet. What shore? How do I know? I only believe that you have much life ahead of you. It's good that you only murdered a little old woman. If you'd come up with a different theory, you might have done something 100 million times more hideous. Maybe you should still thank God. How do you know? Maybe God is saving you for something. Be of great heart and fear less. Now, I would quickly like to add, since I mentioned Raskolnikov's sister and the woman he falls in love with, that now I noticed that most of the miserable male characters in the novel, they are fulfilling some sort of ideal to the point of monomania. As for the female miserable characters, they seem to be more rooted in real world problems, like how are we going to get by, how are we going to feed the kids, and then they also have to deal with these drunken men who are not making anything easier for them. So it sort of makes you wonder how differently men and women are raised in society, and the psychological impact that such an upbringing has on each of them. Men sadly cope with alcoholism and other vices, and as for women, I think women are just left to their own devices, and of course they too have to deal with shit in their own hysterical ways. Now I'm not saying that this is a theme or anything. It's only an observation. There's a lot in Raskolnikov that I could relate to, and a lot of people even told me that on Instagram, that they too empathize with Raskolnikov while reading the book. And I get that, because I remember reading in the introduction that reason leads him to murder, but it's chance that directs him to the axe. So there's that reason part of the process that he understands, but then he is baffled by the chance part of it, because that in itself holds such complexities, which is why he's so divided from the reasonable or rational aspect of himself. Raskolnikov even says that at the very moment of the crime, the destruction of reason and will is like a disease that takes over. But then he fails to understand if it was the disease that led to the crime, meaning was it the darkening of will and reason that convinced him to murder, or is it that transgression in itself is something that always welcomes this disease? I think this has a lot to do with morality. Another stark element, the final one, that sort of defines what Dostoevsky was getting at through this book is the dream that Raskolnikov has at the end of the book. Now he dreams that the whole world goes mad, because everyone starts to believe that their own judgments, moral convictions, and their whole belief system have become unshakable, that everyone is right in what they believe. And so everyone starts to feel anxious, and people fail to understand one another, that there's no good, there's no evil, because nobody knows how to judge anything anymore. So through this, Dostoevsky was referring to veering away from religious doctrines into fatal beliefs, like you have materialism and nihilism. And after all, Raskolnikov is a materialist and nihilist philosopher until he's spoiler alert, until he's exiled for his wrongdoing. So he feels that he has to repent to start a new life. Okay, so that's about it then. I really enjoyed reading this book. It was so good that reading 150 pages a day became normal. Now I'm not showing off or anything, I'm just saying that this book was that interesting. Okay, so that's about it. Actually I'm super sad that I finished this book, because now it means I can't read it for the first time, and that sucks. I wish I had that memory eraser thing they use in the movie Men in Black. What is it called? Neuralizer, yes. So can you guys please send it to me if you all happen to have one. Anyway, so now I'm going to bore you with my next 3 reads, and if you're still watching this video, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. Okay, so my next 3 reads. First one is non-fiction by Carl Jung, Mon Man in Search of a Soul. Now let me read an excerpt from the book so you'll understand why I decided it was time for me to pick this one up. Okay, now this is from the chapter called, let me show you the chapters. It's called The Spiritual Problem of Modern Man. Here, these are the chapters. Okay. So I'm reading this from the Modern Spiritual Problem, right? 204. Yes, quickly. The modern man has lost all the metaphysical certainties of his medieval brother and set up in their place the ideals of material security, general welfare, and humaneness. But it takes more than an ordinary dose of optimism to make it appear that these ideals are still unshaken. Material security even has gone by the board, for the modern man begins to see that every step in material progress adds just so much force to the threat of a most stupendous catastrophe. The very picture terrorizes the imagination. Okay, so what is this book about? This book, it's actually psychological essays that examine, the underground parts of the mind, the mysterious subconscious or unconscious. I've actually already started reading this book. Here's my bookmark. So I am 200 pages in. I have less than 50 pages to go. All right, so now my next read is going to be Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. Now this book was love at first sight, simply because at the back of the book there's enough to convince me that the novel, like the theme of the novel, is structured around a Freudian theory. Now the story is about two sons, right? Gertrude and Walter Morris. Okay, so two sons and their mother and the role that the latter plays in their romantic life. It's also about the role that her sons play in her life as both sons and lovers. Honestly, anything Freudian or Jungian, basically any fiction based on theories formulated by Freud and Jung, and you don't have to sell the book to me anymore. Like I will buy it. I will buy them all. Okay, so the next read is going to be female author. I decided Iris Murdoch's The Sea. Now Aisha has already read this book and she spoke so highly of it, which is rare. And when she likes a book, I have to read it. So in her Instagram post about the book, she wrote, where's my phone? Right here. The protagonist of Iris Murdoch's The Sea faces many existential challenges, and through his brilliant and incisive observations, you, the reader, get a glimpse of the truly heartbreaking ravings of a sad, lonely, and delusional old man. Sold. His sense of identity, his monstrous imagination, envy, delusive hope, and most importantly, his self-serving morality express a deep, painful, ghost-like solitude where one's self-awareness is more trapped than free, so that the only balm is to fall back on the agonizings of the past and see if one can find comfort in those dusty, rotten drawers. Wow, sold twice. Like I need any more convincing. And one more thing I'd like to share. Now, Aisha and I went to this store called The White Crow in Bombay, and we bought, actually I wanted to buy one book. That was my intention, honestly, but we ended up buying 8 books. Let me just get the pile here. Right, so this was all Aisha. She's always spending a lot of money on books, which I end up liking because look at that, it's just ultimate joy. All right, so let's start with, no, this is not what we bought, this was later. This is Iris Murdoch. Like Aisha's reading this right now. We ordered for this book from Amazon. Yeah, so this is not from the store. From the store we have, first one is The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. Aisha's already read Faust, part 1 and 2, and I have read a lot of amazing things about this book, so actually I'm very excited to read this one. Then we have Closely Watched Trains. I really don't know what the cover is about, but it's very interesting. And look how tiny, it's only 80 pages long, short. Alright, then we have Anti-Oedipus. I cannot pronounce the names of the authors for the life of me. And now this one is my personal favorite, Insane. Okay, now I think it's my personal favorite because it has, it has a psychological edge to it. Now, the very concept of madness is called into question in a brutal portrayal of patients and the various treatments administered, from psychotherapy to electric shock therapy. What is madness? Who is truly mad? Diving headlong into a terrifying and oppressive world. Now, insane. Now, this book is insane. I have to read it soon. Then we have Hurricane Season. Then we have Knausgaard. We have two. We have A Man in Love, which is actually the second. Okay, no. First is A Death in the Family. Then we have A Man in Love, volume 1 and 2. Here you go. Now we have, and the last one is the best one actually, How Do You Live by Genzaburo Yoshino. The foreword is by Neil Gaiman. Now this book we immediately ordered for it when we came to know that Miyazaki is making a movie on this book, and that's going to be his last film. If you've watched Spirited Away, then you obviously know who Miyazaki is, and you'll obviously be excited for both the book and his last film. With that, Aisha told me he's dedicating to his grandfather. I don't know why that's important. Sound like Wikipedia. Anyway, so that's this book. Look at that. Yummy. All right. So these are our 7 books which we did not intend on buying, but then we bought because that's what we do. All right. So this brings this video to its inevitable end. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad that you guys watch, and some of you actually read our recommendations. It feels really good to know that we're doing the best we can to appreciate this sort of literature, and even encourage others to pick up these books and expose their brain to this amazing, insightful and isolated world of literature. Lots more to come for sure. Have a good day.